Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us on a very sunny day. David Frank founded RDF Media in 1993 after 4 years as a business journalist with the BBC, working on Newsnight, Panorama, The Money Programme, and the main BBC news bulletins. He was previously a print journalist, editor of Euroweek, and spent 5 years as an investment banker. RDF was founded in 1993, floated on the London stock market in 2005, and was subsequently acquired by a consortium of the RDF management team and VC. In June 2010, D'Agostini, which owned 25% of RDF, acquired the company and merged it into its own Zodiac Entertainment and rebranded the group to become Zodiac Media Group. The newly merged entity is worth as much as €1 billion and is likely to float again within the next 5 years, David Frank told C21 in an interview shortly after the deal was concluded. Towards that or another end, the priority is now to make the group of 45 production companies in 17 countries connected through one distributor, Zodiac Rights, greater than the sum of its parts. Simples. So to tell us how he's going to do that, please welcome Zodiac Group CEO, David Frank.
I'm good, thanks. Where am I?
Just here. So David, thanks for joining us. This is your first sort of official public outing, really, since you took over the position. Certainly, the first time that you've sat and talked about it in any real depth. How's it gone?
Well, so yeah, just to be clear, we concluded the deal end of July last year. Then there was a summer holiday, so I consider my first day in the office, if you like, was beginning of September. So it's essentially 6 months, and it has been a really interesting experience so far. I've had an awful, essentially what I inherited was 4 groups within a group. So that immediately was the first challenge, was rationalizing, making sense of that structure. So one of the first things I did was rebrand the entire group from Zodiac Entertainment to Zodiac Media Group, exactly. So that was, at the last market, was something we'd done almost within the first month. And then underneath that is creating geographical divisions in replacing the individual groups. So the groups at the outset were Marathon Group in France, Magnolia, Spain and Italy, ZTV covered Scandinavia, Russia and some other territories. And then RDF was UK, US. So they've all been put into geographical divisions. So for example, we now have a division called Zodiac UK. And there is no longer a Zodiac Media Group. So I think that in practical terms was the first. But underneath all of that, there's a hell of a lot of work, because this is a group that was created as opposed to organically grown. And as a result, as of 1st of September, the central infrastructure, if you like, the HQ, consisted primarily of a finance department. So part of the other thing that I've been doing in the last 6 months is building a centre for the group, which then leads on, I'm sure, to other questions you want to ask about how do you connect all the bits and pieces to make sense of it all.
When we spoke recently, you said that while that might have taken up an awful lot of time, in many ways, the structure and the sort of consolidation was perhaps the easiest bit, and the biggest challenge was then creating something, investing in creativity to actually bring some hits to the surface. What structures have you put in place between the companies to allow them to sort of cross-pollinate ideas? Because ultimately, I suppose, aggregating those businesses and making them bigger than the sum of their parts has got to be the way forward. I'm just going to move around a bit here so you can face forward a little bit and not see me.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, what I meant by that was that in some respects, the management structures of a creative media group are pretty obvious. I mean, one can debate around the fringes about whether this division should be covering this space or whatever, but the central the central challenge, I'd say, for us and indeed any of the other aggregation groups is around creativity. And how does one try and ensure that the fantastic local talent that's operating very different markets, facing very different challenges in those local markets, with very different opportunities as well, how does one then somehow combine that at the centre without destroying the local creativity? So I've always believed in, during the evolution of the RDF Media Group, my kind of central philosophy was to ensure that there was complete creative autonomy in the local brands, but that you then connected and aggregated the creative talent at the centre to leverage, and not just leverage better deals, but somehow ensure that very talented people have a means of communicating with each other to create those hits.
What have been some of the most surprising subtleties of the different markets that you've sort of come to learn, having had a sort of bigger sort of toolkit to play with? I mean, what are the challenges in the French companies with regard to the British companies, and how?
Well, the thing that struck me most is not so subtle, and that is how, I come from a UK-US background, if you like, and both of those markets are open to innovation. Both are markets in which, in the right circumstances, the IP deal is kind of doable and kind of can fit a business model around which you can own and control and exploit content. But there are many markets in which we operate, and which I think we need to continue operating, where that is almost impossible. I mean, the best example, where we're a very big, probably the largest in Italy. So we make X Factor, for example, in Italy. It's probably the biggest show in that territory. But Italy is a fantastically difficult market, and I've got a huge amount of respect for the guys who've managed to build a sustainable business in that environment. So the subtlety now, for me, or the way in which one connects those pieces, is that in Italy we have huge experience, knowledge, skill sets in managing very big entertainment shows. Those guys don't spend that much time thinking up new ideas, because it doesn't make sense to in Italy, because it's very difficult to sell, and even if you do sell it, you don't hold on to the rights. So part of that is about transferring that skill set into a pool where we can draw on that in creating, say, a show that might get sold in the UK or the US or Scandinavia or Holland, Belgium, markets in which it is possible to make a content sale and control it at in the secondary market.
Which parts of the business are most active at the moment? Which areas of the world and which genres of production do you think are sort of hotspots at the moment?
Well, I mean, our business breaks down, the way I'm looking at it now, into kind of three sub-genre sections. We've got kids, fiction, non-fiction, right? And in their own way, they're all very active, and I'm not just saying that for effect. It's true. We're very active across all those pieces. I think we've got a huge opportunity just taking those in turn in kids. We've become, by virtue of the Zodiac acquisition of RDF, one of, if not the largest creator of new kids properties. We've got fantastic businesses in France, Marathon Media, Teleimage, then combine those with what we already had in the UK in the form of Foundation, and we're generating some, what I believe, over the next 2 or 3 years, will be major global properties in that market. So that's very exciting. In the scripted area, again, I've been very lucky to inherit a kind of very vibrant companies active right across the piece. From in Scandinavia, we have Yellowbird that makes Wallander, makes the Millennium series, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. We're now making, that's a US movie for us now, in which we have a very good deal on that. All the way through to, in the UK, Being Human, which is a show that originated on the BBC, as we've subsequently sold as an origination to Sci-Fi in the US, and that's been picked up for a second season. And in France, we've been major drama producers for some considerable time, and it's a big machine. And then less well known, but equally important, is we make the most popular fiction on television in Russia. So there's a fantastic opportunity for me, and in those different markets, completely, and I've visited them all, there are very different methods of producing that, what is in the end scripted content, very different business models. So again, part of the challenge is to try and introduce all those different models, work practices to the individual companies, and then they can cherry pick the best bits out of it, I hope, to create something special, make them more competitive in their own markets. And then finally, just non-fiction, just very briefly, to complete the piece. A lot going on in entertainment. We've got some big shows launching in the UK, in France. Friday last week, Family Explorer on TF1. It's a big show for us. Sing If You Can on ITV in the UK. We're doing a number of shows in the US. So there's a lot happening in those. So I don't see it as a concentration in any specific market or genre. I'm delighted, and I'm going to answer a question you haven't even asked me, which is one of the immediate points of differentiation I see between us and some of our competitors is precisely the range of our output. So it's really exciting to be managing, and I feel very lucky to be involved in a business where we're doing everything from Le Grand Journal, which is the daily show on TV here in France on Canal+, all the way through to a movie in the US. I genuinely feel I've kind of landed in heaven, being able to work with people who are engaged in that kind of activity. It's great.
I noticed that you started with kids there, and I imagine that the kids is the most sort of franchisable and exportable into different areas of media and entertainment, games, consumer products. Do you see yourselves as a media television company, or do you see yourselves in the future as a brand owner that's actually more about other stuff than the screen?
Yeah, I still see what I can't see beyond 5-10 years, to be honest. Our markets are moving so fast and consumer behavior is moving. But I still believe that now and for some time to come, television remains our core activity. I'm not, I don't subscribe to the theory that the TV business is screwed, that it's all fragmenting, it's all going online and digital. I think a lot of those markets are converging in certain areas, but rightly or wrongly, and time will tell, I consider that we are a TV company first and foremost, and that we will look to create content that we can play on many different platforms, but I still think the ability to aggregate very sizable audiences according to a schedule on the standard TV platforms is where we start and we finish somewhere else.
Having spent that time travelling and getting your head around some new areas as well as some fairly familiar areas, what do you think the appetite is right now from broadcasters around the world, and what are your production companies being tasked to do that they perhaps weren't being tasked to do a year ago?
I don't think that ever changes, as you were saying earlier, I started RDF back in '93, and I think the challenges facing broadcasters in 1993 are not entirely dissimilar to the challenges facing broadcasters in 2011, and that is we're all chasing, hit content. That's what our business is about. Forget all the stuff all the noise around that about business models, about platforms. I absolutely believe, if you have a hit, in the end, the kind of business model works itself out. You find the audiences, you succeed. However clever you think your business model is, and however well managed you think your business is, if you don't have the hit content, then it doesn't work.
What does a hit mean these days, do you think? Because a hit used to mean 35, 40, 50% share. Does a hit in this day and age actually mean it generates revenue in a certain way, or has a different? Do you gauge a hit in a different way going forward?
I think if you are Zodiac, you would definitely define a hit in perhaps different terms to a specific broadcaster, because often hit content for broadcasters is kind of channel defining. Whereas for us, I would say, hit content is content that turns out to be extremely valuable. It doesn't necessarily equate directly with being extremely high profile. More often than not, those two things are connected, but the kids area is a very good example of that, where that market, the way in which it has evolved, has always been international by its nature, has always required a business model that is built around co-production, and has always been reliant on an international audience. So one can have what I'd call a hit for us in the kids area that isn't necessarily the highest rating show on every channel in the world. I think in the entertainment space it's slightly different, because I think, you know, in big entertainment shows do tend to be what we consider to be a hit would also be what a specific broadcaster would consider to be a hit. So again, it's very difficult to, you know, one size doesn't necessarily fit all. But for us, it's ultimately about creating content that we own, or at least have a significant stake in, and that we control the exploitation of more often than not. And then realize the value of that asset through the various exploitation streams.
How are you going to look across the group to decide which properties are the ones that move into production and are perhaps cross-fertilised and shared? Have you got some sort of formula or structure or strategy or intranet designed to build that?
Well, one of after I started, the immediate short-term task was, if you like, a kind of management restructuring, which we've just talked about. Then the second thing, and it's an ongoing project, this, but I consider it to be the most important thing, probably the most important thing I've done in the last 4 or 5 years, actually, which is around the creative initiative at the heart of the group. I've put in place so we started an initiative about this time last market, where we internally, so I didn't outsource this, say, to management consultants. I very deliberately have controlled it in-house. I brought in some key individuals who I've worked with in the past, who I respect enormously, and who I trust. And collectively, through discussion, internal discussion with many of our senior executives, as importantly, an analysis of how have other companies that rely to some extent on creativity, how do they foster and promote that creativity? So it's not just the obvious ones, it's not just your Pixars and other TV groups, it's Toyotas, it could be chemical, pharmaceutical companies. All of them, in the end, rely on some form of creative inspiration. What are any of those particular exercises? And what's really interesting, I won't bore you with the details now, but it's a fantastically stimulating exercise to look at how large corporations incentivize, for example, incentivize staff to contribute to the kind of global endeavor, and how they reward that, the success. So there's a kind of whole array of models out there, and it is genuinely one of the most interesting things that's come out of my experience so far with Zodiac, is actually not looking at Zodiac at all. It's looking at other companies and how they do this. And I suppose that we're now at the stage where the more tricky task, it's very easy watching and listening and applauding. The difficult task for us now is which bits of all those different very successful models, very successful initiatives, what do we think is applicable to our business? And that's the next stage. So this time, next market, but we have launched a number of specific things. So we've created a central creativity and innovation unit. I know it sounds a little bit pie in the sky, but it's absolutely core to what I'm doing. And remember, I'm a producer at heart. So although I have a business background, at the end of the day, what I care about is passionately about creating great shows that everyone's proud to be associated with and that succeed. So we're doing a number of things. Very briefly, we're putting in place an initiative that enables us to communicate directly with our audiences. So I think generally producers are very guilty of listening to one person, and that's their commissioning editor, their buyer. Whereas the reality is all of us should be listening to our audiences.
And how are you going to do that?
That bit I'm not going to share with you, because that's some of the stuff that I think that we've learned from how other companies do it is not necessarily something I want to share with all my competitors. But I think the essential item is that we are going to be investing in a kind of audience research area. We're putting a lot of effort into skill set exchange, putting a lot of investment into what I call the two-screen experience. So that's going back to your earlier point. I still see us as a TV company, but the way in which TV is getting consumed, particularly by the younger generation, is where young kids, not even young kids, quite old kids, are watching and communicating with their friends while watching TV. So in that sense, the digital platforms don't replace telly, they enhance it. So you need great TV shows that people can then interact with in real time, online, where they're talking to their friends about what's on the screen, or they're playing along what's on the screen, because there's a whole generation that's growing up that has the skills to do that.
Do you think that's where the next big thing's going to come from? I mean, some people call it transmedia, which is perhaps a little bit tired already, even though it hasn't really happened yet. But, you know, there hasn't really been a genre-defining format, I would argue, for a while. Is that where you're looking for it?
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment, and I do think that that is... I mean, the odd thing about those big breakthroughs is you don't know you've made it until you've done it, if you see what I mean. You can speculate that looks like, and I would agree with that looks like an area that is ripe for exploitation in the nicest possible sense, because there is there's a young audience out there that live and watch in that way, and nobody has yet created the TV show. And that's the bit I think where broadcasters, where everyone kind of went a bit wrong on the digital revolution, was they started saying, oh, 360 means it's got to start online, the initiative's got to be there, and actually that's where people want to consume their content. And personally, it's a personal view, I think that's a bit of a mistake. There's definitely been successful online properties that have done extremely well, but nonetheless, I think for us as TV producers, this is an opportunity. It's not a threat. There is an opportunity to make our telly more interesting, more entertaining, more relevant by virtue of understanding the digital world better.
Does the fact that you're integrating this process between the companies, the vertically integrated companies, mean that you're not going to collaborate as much with companies outside the group, or what's your current facing in terms of doing business with other potential producers, program suppliers, content owners, co-producers?
Honestly, I don't have, as a matter of principle, a response to that. I think, you know, if you look at our business currently breaks down into two bits. There's the content creation bits and there's the rights exploitation side. What we're not in, and I don't intend to be in because I don't want to be in it, is broadcasting. I'm very, very happy being a content creator and being very platform neutral. But within those two bits of the business, our rights side, where we already represent, I mean, literally hundreds of non-Zodiac companies as an agent, if you like. And I see that continuing because our catalogue is sold as a whole. If you have a very high quality catalogue, you get the best meetings, you command the best prices, and I think it's very desirable for us, therefore, to be in business with a lot of producers that we don't necessarily own. I think the content side, it's probably much more skewed to businesses that we do own, but nonetheless, I'm a believer in, if you own 10% of something extremely valuable, that's a lot better than owning 100% of something that's not valuable. So the end point is what is the value in absolute terms, not whether we own it 100%, whether we're doing it with somebody else. It's about what is the value that's ultimately being created for the shareholders by a certain course of action.
So if you were going to, let's say, enhance the value of the company over the next few years, and you have said that if you're not going to IPO in 5 years, you may still be running the business as if you were going to IPO within 5 years, so you'll be looking to build value. Where are the sweet spots where you're looking to build that value? Is it in the branded entertainment sector? I know you launched Zodiac Active recently to develop that. Is it in games? Is it in the off-screen? Or is it in buying into some companies that you think have got this value? And if so, who are you going to buy next?
I think, I mean, sorry to be boring, but I think that our endeavor is still about hit content. And I always think it's a bit of a smokescreen when people say, you know, we're going to be big in branded content. Yes, of course, brands are getting more involved in the funding of content. Therefore, yes, of course, we're very interested in building those relationships, and we have a very vibrant piece of the business that's engaged directly in that activity. But it doesn't mean it's the tail wagging the dog, I think, when your business model somehow is trying to determine what the outcome is. Really, our business models should flow from how do we best exploit the talent that is our producers, because they create the shows. The job of the guys upstairs is in what framework do you then ensure you're getting the best value from that. But it's the guys in the engine room, the producers, who are 90% of it. I think my bit is the cream on the cake, not the cake itself.
How did you feel burying RDF? It was a very warmly felt brand. You had to put it under. What is its legacy and how is Zodiac different?
It's not entirely, well, for a start, just to correct you, the RDF, I started, the company I started was RDF Television. What was now RDF was called RDF Productions way back then, but it's RDF Television. That still exists as a brand. There is a physical company in London called RDF Television that makes lots of shows. So it wasn't, I never killed that. What I dismantled was the RDF Media Group brand, which encompassed, by the time we did the Zodiac deal, about a dozen companies across the UK and the US. And yes, but as an individual, I tend to look forwards, not backwards. I was much more interested in the opportunity that was arising as a result of being part of a bigger group than necessarily shedding tears about the fact that we were saying goodbye to RDF Media Group. And I think that goes for everyone in the group as well. I think I was very proud of what we built collectively. Everyone worked there in that time. And this just feels like a new, exciting chapter. It doesn't feel like somehow it's there doesn't seem a negative angle to it. It really doesn't.
We're sort of really running quite short of time. I don't think I'm going to take any questions. Sorry about that, everybody, but I just think David's been saying such a lot of stuff that's relevant that we don't need to do that. I'm going to say one final question. Yeah. A year from now, how will the company be different, and what stands in your way from achieving where you'd like to go over the next 12 months, if anything?
I think that, well, the biggest single challenge for me is around people, right? How do I motivate, retain the very best talent in the market? How do I attract the very best talent in the market? Because I think that if I've got the best team, so I'm a very big football fan, and I feel that the analogy with football is very similar. What you do is try and put a squad together, give them a great environment in which to operate. There's a bit of luck involved, a bit of time and patience, and where it starts, where I fail, if you ask me, is I can't be responsible for their creativity. I can be responsible for people leaving or for businesses going down because the people are unhappy. So I'd say my key task is to ensure that that doesn't happen. So I would measure the first part of whether I'm doing a good job or not on whether people within Zodiac feel that they're supported, that it's a great place to work, that it's risk-taking, all the things one associates with companies that make a splash in the creative space.
And you've still got places to go, the States, Australia, Germany, this sort of holes
in the States.
Certainly, you've got one series away there. I imagine that the growth is quite...
Yeah, the US is a huge market. We've got a lot of series on in the States, though. So we've got networks shows on in the non-scripted space. We've got a pretty sizable business there already. In the scripted area, we've got some very exciting developments. I mean, I think the ability, one of the great strengths of a group such as ours is our access to many different broadcasters and the ability to put together finance for those really big, ambitious projects. I think, I certainly know from my RDF days, would be virtually impossible unless you had those pieces in place. So we've got a very big project which that we're looking to do, for example, with Canal Plus, that relies on our ability to leverage a sale in the US, say in Canada, and a couple of other territories, But it's going, it'll be it'll be a very large, very ambitious production when it happens, and I think that's that's the other thing that we're about.
Cool. Well, it's been brilliant talking to you. Thanks for coming inside on such a lovely day.
That's fine.
Ladies and gentlemen, David Frank.
Cool. Thanks.
And I'd like to invite Laureen back onto stage, who's going to introduce the next keynote. Laureen.
Cool.